Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined today by Pat Fitzmaurice and by Derek Brown. D-Bro, you were just telling us you have finally seen Deadpool and Wolverine. We won't take too much time on this, I promise, but I have been asking you to see it in Canton at the Expo. I was like, please, let's go see it now. I want to talk to you about this movie. How fun is that movie?
Oh, dude, no spoilers. I'm not going to give anybody spoilers because we talked about this in Canton. I said I would kick you below the belt if you gave me any spoilers, and I meant every word of it.
You didn't say below the belt.
Fair. And everybody can take that as you please. But, dude, it was amazing. Like, I'm on cloud 9 right now, man. Like, it is glorious. It is a beautiful, beautiful day. And I'll tell you this. I'm going to go see it again next week. I don't care if I know it already happens. I'm going again.
The important thing is that it's just a fun time, right? Like, I'm not saying it's the best Marvel movie ever. I'm not saying it's this all-time great script. I had some problems with, like, some of the stuff they did, the ending, whatever. It was just a really fun 2 hours at the movie theater. It's
so good.
It really rewards you if you are a big superhero movie fan, at least to me personally. Your mileage may vary. Everybody can disagree. I knew you would love it, which is why I wanted you to see it. Yeah, I had a lot of fun seeing that. Also, D-Bro, I already asked Fitz this earlier this week. Have you fully recovered from the Expo yet?
Dude, it's legit. Like, I just now, so when I came home that day and Monday, I was so tired, dude. Those 3 and 4 a.m. nights, while they might not hurt Fitzy that much, the rest of us are definitely licking our wounds.
Was there any night, Fitz, that we didn't close down George's?
No, there was not.
No,
unfortunately.
And thank God my voice is better. Guys, sounded like the Crypt Keeper the entire time we were in Canton.
I needed a couple of days to get the voice back to at least something close to normal. So hopefully we're getting close to that at this point. All right, we're going to jump in here to our top 10 breakout candidates in 2024. It is exactly what it sounds like, guys, that we think are going to really smash this year. So we're going to be drafting a lot of them in all of our leagues. Just a heads up for everybody, all of our 2024 consensus rankings and tiers can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. All right, let's dive into our breakout candidates here. We're going to go 5-1 for each of you. Fitz, we'll start with you. Give us your number 5 breakout candidate.
It's Pat Freiermuth. And we just did a preseason fantasy roundtable this week. You can find it on fantasypros.com or look on my Twitter timeline to find it. And we talked about our tight end strategy, preferred tight end strategy for 2024. Debro, Erickson, and Mike Mayer all advocated the elite tight end strategy, and I'm the lone wolf who wants to leverage what I consider to be unusual depth at the tight end position. Like, there's some pretty nice options after tight end 8. Jake Ferguson, Brock Bowers, who I'm very, very into, David Njoku, and if you want to exercise extreme patience, hammer away at the running back and wide receiver positions in the early round, and then be like one of the last guys in your draft to grab a tight end. Pat Freiermuth is going anywhere from tight end 12 to tight end 15. So let's start with the premise that I think Pat Freiermuth is actually a pretty good player. 15 touchdowns his first 2 years at Penn State in an offense that doesn't really feature tight end all that much. On the John Mackey Award watch list going into his junior year, but got hurt, only played 4 years, was averaging 77 yards a catch before he got hurt. Then goes to the Steelers as a second-round pick in 2021, 60 catches, 70 touchdowns as a rookie. Not a great yardage total, just 497. But then he goes into year 2, 63 catches, 732 yards, only 2 touchdowns, but he had Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky as his primary quarterbacks that year. Last year, only 12 games due to injury. It was kind of a wipeout. The Steelers had the shaky QB situation again. Now, better QB situation with either Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. And like, the target outlook looks very good. And we should issue the disclaimer that as of this recording, the Steelers were possibly on the verge of a Brandon Ayuk trade that maybe by the time this video comes out has gone down already. I think even if Ayuk does go to the Steelers, Freiermuth probably looking like the number 3 target in Pittsburgh, and like targets to go around for him. And I still think he is very well positioned to return a profit on his late low-end TE1, high-end TE2 ADP. But if there's no Ayuk, if that deal falls apart, And it's just George Pickens and really Freiermuth is the next guy because the Steelers wide receiver core is thin. Then all of a sudden the target outlook gets much better. And now to the good parts. The much maligned Arthur Smith is the new offensive coordinator and play caller for the Steelers. And yes, this is actually the good part. I know Arthur Smith is the boogeyman to a lot of fantasy managers, but Smith is a former tight ends coach. And last year, with him as the head coach and primary play caller for the Falcons tight ends combined for 174 targets, 114 catches, 1,380 yards, and 7 touchdowns. And granted, those numbers were chopped up among Kyle Pitts, Jonnu Smith, and some other tight ends, but there aren't really a lot of other tight ends to share the load with Freiermuth this year. There's Darnell Washington, a day 2 pick last year, but really more of a blocker, like a 6th offensive lineman type, was not a prolific pass catcher at the University of Georgia. There's Connor Hayward, Michael Pruitt, not much there. So it's not hard to see maybe the first 100 target season of Pat Freiermuth's career. And I think he could maybe, if he can blend those 7 touchdowns he had in his rookie season with the 700 plus yards he had in his second season, now we're on to something, and you're turning a nice profit at the tight end position with a pretty low expenditure.
Yeah, Debro, I'm curious your opinion, not just on Freiermuth, but on tight end strategy. I am definitely somebody who is championing the elite tight end approach this year. That's less because it's less about how I feel about the depth of the position and more about I just really love those top 6 or 7 guys. I think any one of them could finish as tight end 1, realistically. I just really love that group. If I am not getting one of those elite guys, by and large, in all the leagues where I'm passing on them, I'm getting Pat Freiermuth. He is my favorite of these. If you're going to wait on tight end, I think he's the right target here. So I love him as a breakout candidate. Debro, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll be honest, boys. I've probably been a little bit too low on Freiermuth. And some of this just, I don't know what to do with the Pittsburgh Steelers offense after Pickens and the running backs. Agnostic of the quarterback, because I just don't know how good they're going to be. With the touchdown ceiling, we know that the lifeblood of tight ends is not only the targets and the upside in those respects and the yardage, but can they get touchdowns? And we've just seen Arthur Smith do a lot of wonky things in the red zone, whether we know we're going to get weeks. We know this, boys. We're going to get weeks where we have Cordell Patterson involved in the red zone. It's coming. It's going to happen. I get that. But I will absolutely acknowledge I'm probably too low on Freiermuth. As Pat's going through the spiel, I was like, man, I need to bump him up. I had him at tight end 20. I bumped him up to tight end 17 right now. I think the case for him starts somewhere around tight end 13. Pat, where do you have him in ranks right now? Because I just feel like there's other guys in good offenses. I feel like he's in that long kind of tier of Cole Kmet, Schultz, Jonnu Smith, where their targets are really going to be, but they're all locked inside of really dang good offenses. So, I'm wondering if touchdowns carry them there. But where do you have Freiermuth? I'm guessing, tight end 12, 13-ish? Is that
12,
too high?
12, just behind Njoku and ahead of Dallas Goedert.
Okay. Yeah, I don't hate that.
So he is, just so everybody knows, he's tight end 13 in consensus, and he's 118th overall. I want to be above consensus on him, so I actually have him probably a little too aggressively, honestly, at tight end 10. I might bump him down a spot or two, but I do want to be ahead of consensus on Freiermuth because he's just one of the guys that I'm drafting the most of. I really like the cost, and I think the upside is apparent if things break right for him. So like I said, I want to be aggressive on him. That might be a little too aggressive. Dever, let's go to your number 5 breakout candidate.
Well, it's a guy that, you've heard me and Erickson kind of wax poetic about previously, so nobody's going to be shocked about that, but it's Josh Palmer, man. I get that he's wide receiver 55 and ECR and stuff, but I think that's definitely blasphemous. What we saw out of him last year with no Mike Williams in the lineup, we're talking about a wide receiver that garnered almost a 19% target share, produced 2.19 yards per route run, which is awesome, and averaged 71.1 receiving yards per game. And I know everybody's thinking, okay, well, the Chargers are not going to throw the ball like we've seen in previous seasons. I get that. But what if Palmer, and not everybody's favorite son, Lad McConkey, what if Palmer is the wide receiver 1 of this offense and everything that everybody's projecting and hoping for McConkey? And the thing about him is, how much outside does he play? Like, is he going to be a guy that plays when they only have 2 wide? I don't know about that. Like, that's something that's seriously a concern. It easily could be Palmer and DJ Chark. And while that's not like a coffin nail for him, that can be the difference between an 80 to 90% route share and 68, 70% living in the 70s. So Palmer, I think, has the talent. And I have not been somebody that was immensely high on Palmer in previous years, but he really showed out last year when the avenue to step up was there. And that definitively is presenting itself again in 2024. So again, a player that I think really already made a leap in front of our eyes. And I think he can take another step forward this season.
I like the Palmer call. And looking at our staff rankings, and guys, feel free to correct me if these are not up to date yet. I see Palmer wide receiver 41 for you, Debro, and wide receiver 56 for you, Fitz. I do have him a lot closer to Debro. For me, the question mark is not the offense and like how much they're going to throw. Like they will throw enough that with Justin Herbert as your quarterback, and with you being the only, and you being Josh Palmer, with you being the only like proven to any degree target in the offense, like they will throw enough that I think he can be like a very successful draft pick for you and qualify as a breakout. The concern for me is not Greg Roman, it's the health of Justin Herbert. Like I just get worried with any kind of foot injury. And if Herbert is not in the picture in any game, like Palmer, everybody in this offense is completely unstartable in my opinion, outside of maybe the running backs. So like for me, that's what I'm keeping a closer eye on, less so than the kind of run pass balance from Greg Roman. I think the pass will be heavy enough that the top guy will be valuable. Fitz, why are you a bit lower on Palmer?
Just the run heaviness of the offense under Greg Roman. Inevitable, they're going to be top 3 in run rate. Like that's just the Greg Roman offense. But, you know, like I don't know if there's a splashy upside for Palmer because we do know, I think that Ladd McConkey is going to draw a lot of the short area targets. But I do think Palmer complements him pretty nicely as like the intermediate guy. And like his targets are going to be worth more than the Ladd McConkey targets. And Herbert's got a great arm. So like that's a good pairing for Josh Palmer, a guy who can zip it to him 15 or 20 yards downfield. So yeah, I mean, like I think Palmer is a really good value because he does not get overdrafted. Like he's not a sexy name that people are dying to get their hands on. And usually he's there in you know, something close to the double digit rounds. And a pretty good option is like your 4th wide receiver.
Yeah, I love the fact that you brought that up, Fitz, because that's the volume concerns I think are more damning for McConkey because of his role. I love that you hit on that because that's the other part about Palmer. When people say, okay, well, the volume's a big concern. Okay, it's more of a concern for somebody that's going to have to make all their living in the short area and really create a lot for themselves. Whereas if it's not DJ Chark that's going to stretch the field, I think it's going to be Josh Palmer. So those are the things that kind of help band-aid the fact that his volume is going to be decreased from previous seasons.
Can I throw out just another Chargers option as a breakout candidate? I think J.K. Dobbins qualifies, especially we saw kind of some of the beat reporting that like Vidal might not make the team even. Like we'll see how that ultimately ends up playing out. But we're talking about how this is going to be such a run-heavy offense. We've talked about how he's kind of a high upside, you know, play, talking about Dobbins throughout the offseason. But all the reports out of camp are that he looks really explosive and like is running remarkably well given the injury stuff. Like I get that. Again, your mileage may vary if you are somebody who's been burned by Dobbins before and doesn't want to take the risk on the injury, but where he's going, I know you guys are like a little bit lower than the rest of the staff on him. I just think he's the type of person who could fit this bill really well. And we could be sitting here in week 3 and be saying like, this guy looks like arguably a league winner where he's going. Debro, what do you think about Dobbins? Just as a quick aside.
Yeah, I could see the upside with the volume. It's just, it's twofold for me. Health and what do we get out of him from a tackle breaking perspective? Like I worry that this backfield is going to turn into like a muddied mess. Like I don't know if Dobbins can assert himself to be like a 15 to 17 touch per game player, both with Gus there and Vidal and, well, hell, Jarrett Patterson, whoever the RB3 is. I wonder if like, you know, everybody's concerns a little bit about Derrick Henry and like, oh, Justice Hill and other guys, like, and how they split the backfield up. I wonder if we get that type of backfield where it's like, we've got 2 to 3 options that are really going to be touchdown dependent flexes and not enough volume for him to truly step up, even if he is 100%, which again, I still kind of wary about.
Fitz, I don't even need to ask you about Dobbins. I know that you have two main concerns, health and also health. So
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's it. As much as I would like to see a fairy tale ending here, I'm just not betting on a running back who's had a torn Achilles and major reconstructive knee surgery.
That's fair. I just wanted to throw him out because we're talking about the Chargers, and he's become at cost my favorite running back to target in that backfield late in drafts. It's time to throw another shrimp on the Barbie. Get in on all the UFC 305 action live from the land down under at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of UFC. The middleweight title is on the line for the main event, but the card is stacked full of rip snorter blokes and Sheilas. And speaking of stacked, if you're new to DraftKings, listen up. New customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code FantasyPros. That's code FantasyPros for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. UFC 305. It's going to be a ripper of a good time. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Are you giving away a bloomin' onion with that read?
That was really
nice.
good, Worm. The first time I heard you do that read, you didn't really commit to the bit. Like you kind of half did it, but that time you really leaned into it.
That was well done.
Props. I thought Debro would appreciate it. I'm not much of a impressionist or an accent person, but it's easy because it's all the same phrases you hear Australians like. It's like the kind of the stereotype stuff anyway. But I also
you went a little bit like slightly Crocodile Hunter, but not full.
Again,
bore,
I'm not good at accents. I was gonna say I always went to slide into like going back to some of the Seinfeld conversation, like maybe the dingo ate your baby.
Oh, good Lord.
Which I'm sure Debra doesn't even get that reference. All right, let's go to number 4 from Fitz.
It's Rashid Shaheed, and I'm not just pandering to Debro, the Saints fan, with this one. So Shaheed had 46 catches, 719 yards, and 5 touchdowns for the Saints last year, but he missed 2 games and only had a 58% snap share. Now Shaheed is pretty much cemented in as the Saints' number 2 receiver behind Chris Olave. That snap share is likely to be closer to, say, I don't know, maybe like 75% this year. So more opportunities, higher target volume, more chances for big plays. And Shaheed is a dangerous big play receiver. I mean, we've seen it on some of his kick returns. This guy is explosive. Of his 46 catches last year, 7 of them covered 40 or more yards. He averaged 16.3 yards per catch in his first 2 NFL seasons. He's averaging a ridiculous 11.1 yards per target. Shaheed's just a good player. Like, I think there's wide receiver 2 upside here. And I know not everyone is excited about investing in anyone who is tethered to Derek Carr. But I mean, like Carr can make his receivers go over for fantasy. Like earlier in his career, he actually supported 2,000-yard receivers with the Raiders with Michael Crabtree and Amari Cooper. So, and by the way, if anything were to happen to Olave, all of a sudden Shaheed is like the number 1 target in this offense. So I think there's a pretty attractive ceiling here for an explosive young player.
Debro, you are the resident Saints guy. What do you think about this pick?
Shaheed almost made my list. I'm with Fitzy here. And I think the other part about this is like this offense has been consolidated down to, because no Michael Thomas, but Juwan Johnson being hurt and does another tight end. And no, we're not going to go into a long conversation about Taysom Hill. We're not doing that. But I really think like you're looking at a consolidated passing offense with really Olave, Shaheed, and Kamara like leading the way. And Shaheed is a guy like, I mean, I know like what median projections are probably around like 90, maybe 100 targets. What if he gets into that 120 range and we get the downfield ability and he takes another step forward? Because again, this is not like a 6th or 7th year player that we're talking about. Oh, there's more opportunity here. This is a young player who we really still have not seen thrive or flourish and be in a full-time role for the entirety of an NFL season. So I think there's tons of upside here. I love the call by Fitzy.
Yeah, it's funny. Shaheed was getting so much juice during Scott Fishbowl season because of those settings. And I'm kind of needing to reset myself. Like, he's also a pretty good target in a normal league as well, not just in Scott Fishbowl. So I think it's a good call too. Debra, who's your number 4 breakout candidate?
Oh man, I'm sorry. I'm not going to be worried about the fossilized corpse of Ezekiel Elliott. I'm just not. I'm not worried about him. I'm not worried about how the old man Ezekiel Elliott. Like, I want to be drafting a ton of Rico Dowdle. Where he's going, I mean, he's basically free money. It's RB4 territory all freaking day. And I think he's hands down the best running back on this roster. And I think he can distance himself from Zeke. I mean, if you look at Dowdle, it's really been all of the injuries. He's a player that, yes, and there are OG prospect stand tweets from myself from years ago about Rico Dowdle. I think now he finally gets the opportunity to take hold of the backfield, and all we need is health. I went back and earlier in this offseason and I watched all the carries from last year, all of his all 22, and I was impressed. Like, I don't think that he's a player that we're saying you put him in a stretch zone scheme and he just runs away from people. But as far as like one cut downhill, powerful runner that also, guess what, boys, can play in the passing game. Amongst all running backs last year with at least 20 targets, Rico Dowdle, and I get it was a small sample, was 11th in yards per route run. Now you marry that also amongst 53 qualifying backs. He was 16th in yards after contact per attempt. This is a player that I think we are sleeping on his upside, because this is one of those things what we play this game every year, guys, like where it's like ambiguous situation. We don't know what to do with it. It doesn't seem like it's great. And so a lot of people just avoid it when I think we need to be running to Rico Dowdle in drafts.
141st overall in half point PPR ECR, RB 44. Fitz, what do you think about those numbers?
Yeah, it's an appealing price for him for sure. And like, I don't know that I've settled on whether I think he's good yet, but like, I thought what he showed us last year looked pretty good. And but we do know running back is as much about opportunity as talent, if not more about the opportunity. And he's going to get opportunity this year for sure, because Zeke just cannot carry a backfield the way he used to like 4 and 5 years ago. And we're hearing a lot about how like the Titans backfield is interchangeable with Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears having similar skill sets. I mean, maybe it's kind of the same way in Dallas to some degree, because like we saw Zeke kind of do a lot as a pass catcher last year for New England. And as Debro mentioned, like definitely like Dowdle is not a zero as a pass catcher. Mm-hmm. So maybe either of these guys could play early downs or either of these guys could play passing downs. And I don't think it's like totally inconceivable that Dowdle winds up out snapping Zeke on early downs. So, yeah, for the price right now, I mean, he is a really nice dart throw in the late rounds.
All right, Fitz, let's go to your number 3. You just alluded to him, talking about Rico Dowdle. Tyjae Spears is your next guy up. Just to give everybody his ECR, 93rd overall, RB 31.
Yeah, so Tyjae Spears, he had 838 yards from scrimmage last year as a rookie, despite the fact that he was playing behind Derrick Henry, who led the NFL in rushing attempts. So now Spears goes from playing behind an iconic workhorse running back to sharing a backfield with Tony Pollard, who, look, I'm not going to say that Tony Pollard is bad or anything, but like he's coming off kind of a bad year, or at least a disappointing year. I mean, we've seen Tony Pollard look really good earlier in his career, but now he's kind of a question mark going into this year. So, and yes, it may have been at least partially injury related. Like Pollard had that broken foot in the playoffs the previous season, started to look better towards the end of the 2023 regular season. But we have heard Brian Callahan, the Titans' new head coach, talk about viewing Pollard and Spears as co-starters, as guys who can be used interchangeably, even whether it's early downs or on passing downs. And Spears was really good in the passing game last year. 52 receptions, a 51.2% route participation rate. Spears is going to have to share targets with Pollard, but Spears only had 100 carries last year, and that number is sure to go up this year. Easy to see him with a number of rushing attempts that's closer to like 150, 160, maybe even north of that. And by the way, I mean, I think Brian Callahan's dad, Bill Callahan, is going to fix an offensive line that really didn't do the Titans running backs many favors last year. Bill Callahan's probably one of the best offensive line coaches of all time. I think they'll get that sorted. And, Spears looked really good last year 4.5 yards per carry behind that pretty mediocre offensive line. Matt Waldman, who friend of the show and a guy whose player analysis we really value, he's talked about how important it is for a running back to be able to make cuts without throttling down their speed. And that's one of the things I liked when I watched Tyjae Spears play last year, that he seemed to be able to change direction really well without gearing down. So he does have that weird knee issue where he doesn't have any cartilage or whatever in one of his knees. And maybe that leads to a Jay Ajayi type career where he has one kind of big season and then falls off the map a little. So I'm definitely more interested in him in redraft than dynasty, but I'm really interested in him in redraft for 2024.
I've been kind of buying the dip on Pollard a lot this draft season just because, Debo had him as his RB1 last year, and he was coming off an injury, and now theoretically is, more healthy than he was for the first half of last season. So I have been trying to get a lot of Tony Pollard, possibly at the expense of the Spears I've been getting, and I think that could actually backfire. So I do like this call. Debro, what do you make of Spears, and what's the gap between him and Pollard in your rankings?
I've got both of them as RB3s. I do have Tony Pollard ahead of Spears, but I like taking both of them in various instances. I think earlier this week in the mock draft episode, I took Tyjae Spears as my RB2 on a 0 RB build because he is a fantastic upside play. Like, I have Pollard at RB27, Spears is at RB33. I'm willing to own this. I could be wrong on that, like having Pollard ranked over Spears, because the talent, Fitzy nailed it. The talent of Spears is fantastic. I think they brought in Pollard to limit Spears' touches because of the knee issues, the history there, but that doesn't mean that he can't still be really stinking good. What if this Titans offense outperforms expectations? We get more touchdowns, and even if from the sense of what if he's this year's Jaylen Warren? Jaylen Warren was an RB2 or better in weekly scoring in 50% of his games. So that's only in a true kind of committee aspect where maybe Pollard takes the early down and Spears takes a little bit of the early down, but most of the pass game work. There's upside here for more, because we still don't have definitive clarity about how this backfield is truly going to shake out.
I love how Debro is previewing the episode while we're taping. He just tweeted Rico Dowdle breakout season incoming as we were talking about Rico Dowdle. So a little peek behind the curtain there. He tweeted that while we were taping this episode.
You always give me crap about you always know when I'm prepping and who I'm prepping for shows, because you're like, oh, well, here come the tweets. Just firing them off.
That makes me laugh. I haven't seen any tweets yet about the next guy you're about to talk about. Give us your number 3 breakout candidate.
It's because I've been talking about him since January. People are tired of hearing about it, but I think people are coming around, man, and they really, really should on Jaleel McLaughlin. Again, this week, dropping on Fantasy Pros YouTube channel, I have a must-have running back video dropping, and guess what? Surprise! McLaughlin is in there, baby. I've been touting him since January because the path for upside is firmly there. We know we want to buy into a Sean Payton offense. We want to buy the passing down back. We want to invest in that type of role. And I think that is McLaughlin's role to lose. There is nothing that's come out of Denver camp to this point that would make me think otherwise. P. Ryan is on the cut bubble. We've been talking about that since before the draft. And looking at the role that McLaughlin could play, it's not only just that he was uber freaking efficient with every touch that he got last year. He was top 15 explosive run rate, missed tackles forced per attempt, and yards per route run. It's also the fact that we know the volume there can be there for him in the pass game. And I've shared this before, but it doesn't make it any less relevant. Denver led the league in running back targets last year. Last 9 years for Sean Payton coordinating an offense, they've never finished lower than 4th. So if you don't believe in McLaughlin, that's fine. But the path is firmly there. He's talented, and all the offseason talk about him has been extremely positive. So I'm going to continue drafting him because, again, none of that has caught up with his ADP or his ECR, any of it. And I think it really, RB 47 in ECR, wake up, people. Give him some respect.
Yeah, 146th overall, Fitz. That's the most affordable player of anybody we're talking about today.
I like him a lot, and I've drafted him a lot. And Debro kind of nailed it with the Sean Payton offenses. It was 153 running back targets for the Broncos last year, and I think there was only one other team that had more than 130. So it is someone in the Denver backfield is going to be awash in targets. And like Peyton has this history of committee backfields, but with multiple members of the committee being fantasy viable. Like we saw that with Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram. We saw it early in Peyton's tenure in New Orleans with like Reggie Bush and I think Pierre Thomas. So, I think Jaleel could be part of that. And it sounds like they really kind of like him as a sort of good citizen on the Broncos, a guy who's like one of the first in the facility and the last out every day, like a guy who really wants to work at his craft and get better. And like Sean Payton has publicly called him out on that. So it sounds like he's going to have some sort of prominent role in that backfield.
If you want a chance to win a signed Joe Burrow helmet for free, courtesy of our friends at pristineauction.com, all you need to do is head to fantasypros.com/contest, complete the form, and either download the Fantasy Pros Draft Wizard app, leave a review for the podcast, or follow us on X, Instagram, or TikTok at Fantasy Pros. The more actions you complete, the more entries you receive. We will be announcing a winner right here on the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize. Guys, while we were taping, Ian Rappaport tweeted out that Vikings first-round quarterback J.J. McCarthy underwent a full meniscus repair this morning and is out for the 2024 season. Obviously, Debro is going to need to take a moment here, I assume. I mean, it's very sad, obviously, just to see anybody get hurt, be out for the year. I don't mean to make light of it, but, this has been one of Debro's guys throughout the draft season, and he's been very, much higher on him than consensus. And it's a bummer. I mean, because he looked good, early on here for whatever that, small sample size is worth. And it just sucks. Debro, I'll kind of let you touch on this first.
Injuries freaking suck, dude. This sucks. I mean, for McCarthy, especially going out and having a chance in preseason and the small sample size we got, looked like a player who has made some sizable adjustments to his game in the offseason. Layered throws to the second level, looking good, throwing touch passes, and a lot of that was littered in his college tape, and that's why I was so immensely high on him. And now losing his entire rookie season, whether or not Sam Darnold started the entire year or not, it's really the practice reps. Because I didn't look at this season as like, okay, Vikings are pushing for the playoffs. Like, I think that's next year. But it just blows, man. I mean, him being shelved for the entire year because of the injury, it just hurts as far as his availability to get the practice reps that he needs, and we should all want for him. But I think the fallout of this, too, is looking at Sam Darnold. He's the unquestioned starter of the entire season for the Minnesota Vikings. Like, unless he falls on his face, then we get Nick Mullins. But right now, I mean, come on, guys. Where do you think we should be moving Sam Darnold? Like, I had him at QB 30 because of the situation still being up in the air. Live right now, I'm probably moving him up to, is QB 20 too high?
I had him at 27 before this. In consensus, he's at QB 34. So he's way low, and that will certainly rise. I mean, I think
I've got him right behind Matthew Stafford. I think in that mid QB2, low end QB2.
I think he's definitely a QB2. I think he needs to be inside the top 24. Yeah. Knowing that he's going to be the starter the whole season with the weapons that they have. Fitz, what do you think?
I'll probably put him at QB 24 behind Baker Mayfield. The Vikings, and really I have no love lost for the Vikings as a fan of the Green Bay Packers, but that is like the most snake-bitten franchise in the NFL. And I know Cleveland Browns fans might take issue with that, but going all the way back to the Gary Anderson miss in the late 90s. And man, I mean, this is just like, here's a franchise that's kind of trying to retool. And I mean, they had a draft pick die in a car crash this offseason. They've got their quarterback of the future now who's going to miss his entire rookie season with a major knee injury. I feel bad for Vikings fans. Man, it's like just talk about a kick in the teeth right before the start of the season.
Debro, are you moving down Justin Jefferson at all as a result of this, or is he going to kind of stay in the same spot he was for you?
No, I'm still perfectly fine with Jefferson.
Yeah,
we saw it last year, guys. He was the wide receiver 4, even with replacement level quarterback play. I mean, we've seen Darnold feel some pretty good fantasy seasons, previously. So I'm not saying he's amazing, but I think he can be league average as far as target quality. And if that's all that Jefferson needs, he's going to need.
DJ Moore had, I want to say 93 catches and like 1,157 yards in 2021 with Darnold as his primary quarterback. So
does it hurt Addison when he's on the field and you say Darnold can maybe sustain one high end receiver? And Debra, I know you weren't even high on Addison to begin with, but does it knock him down any further dealing with Darnold?
I think it knocks him down a little bit. What I think, honestly, the real big the fallout here is if the Minnesota Vikings are a team that are not, we've talked about their opening schedule. Say they start out 0-4, 0-5, maybe 0-6. It's possible if you look at their schedule. If that's the case, I think the biggest fallout for rankings is honestly, are they more conservative now with TJ Hawkinson? And out of everybody in that offense, should we be bumping down his rank if we're going to move anybody out of that offense?
I'm trying to think of a name. Is there any quarterback out there that's available that the Vikings?
Ryan Tannehill, but we're talking about, I think Darnold has more left on the, more tread left than Ryan Tannehill does. So,
yeah, it's just a shame. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it
sucks.
It's terrible to see guys get hurt, especially their whole year, especially a rookie quarterback we're really excited to see. It's just a bummer. So, wanted to bring it up since that news broke while we were taping here. Let's dive back into the breakout candidates here. Fitz, we'll go to your number 2 breakout candidate.
I'm going to throw out another Denver running back, Javonte Williams. And I actually like both Jaleel McLaughlin and Javonte Williams at cost this year, because now we have seen Javonte slip into mid-range running back 3 territory. And Javonte is, granted, coming off a pretty lackluster season, just 3.6 yards per carry last year. Didn't really show us much of the powerful running and explosiveness we saw from him back in his rookie year when he was sharing work with Melvin Gordon. But now Javonte is more than a full year removed from knee surgery after the ACL tear. Hopefully we'll get more of that power and explosiveness that he was showing off in his rookie season. And by the way, those rumors several weeks ago that Javonte was maybe on the cut bubble for the Broncos, I think we can do away with those since Javonte's consistently been running as the Broncos starter in training camp. And the pass catching, again, as Debro was just talking about, very appealing. Sean Payton's offenses they're always getting the ball to the running backs. And now in comes Bo Nix, who was this check down and screen machine in college. So, we might even surpass the 153 running back targets the Broncos had last year. And I already shared this stat, I think, in a previous show, but just wanted to drop it again. And a hat tip to our friend JJ Zacharyson for digging up this little nugget. Since 2011, Sean Payton teams account for 8 of the 20 highest running back target shares in the NFL. So, again, this is just a pass catching bonanza for this backfield. And it's probably going to get chopped up a couple of different ways. But I think the 2 primary beneficiaries are going to be Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin.
Did you mention where you have him ranked, Fitz? He's in ECR 87th overall, RB 29.
Yeah, I believe I have him ranked RB 26, but just let me confirm that. It looks like I've got him RB 27, sorry, right behind Tony Pollard, but I might have to flip-flop those two because I think I just took him in a draft where I had Tony Pollard available as an option.
Well, they're kind of interesting parallels in that they're both another year removed from major injuries, and I tend to really be drawn towards those guys. They're also both in, to different degrees, crowded backfields. Javonte Williams, Zebra, obviously you are so high on McLaughlin that it's, there's only so many names that can get fed in this backfield, but are you high on Javonte as well? And maybe are willing to kind of get both guys on your teams?
Yeah. I will say this. I was very low on Javonte entering this draft season, but I've come around on him. I bumped him up to RB32. I have McLaughlin at RB29. Only because, again, we talked about the pass catching, and that's really the role that I want. If I'm picking one of the guys or one of the roles out of this offense to carve out, I want the pass catching option. And I'm not saying that Javonte cannot catch passes. We saw he can catch passes. His efficiency metrics in that department were pretty good last year. So I'm not just totally ruling out Javonte, but the offseason talk from Sean Payton has been good about Javonte. Lost weight, been looking good at camp. And so I have bumped him up. I still, at the moment, will keep McLaughlin ahead of him while acknowledging that I probably could come up a little bit more in Javonte and looking at, I mean, they're all in that same kind of like soup of like this split backfield, like the Tennessee guys, the Pittsburgh guys, where like they all probably belong in RB3 territory. It just kind of depends on which side of the aisle do you want to sit.
Debro, give me your number 2 breakout candidate.
Oh, man, this is a guy that, and guess what? The beat reports are saying yet again that he's tearing it up in camp today. Jaxon Smith-Njigba, come on down, baby. I think the second-year breakout is going to happen. We do not have Shane Waldron neutering him into Seattle's version of Malachi Corley this year. That's not going to happen. He's going to be used on the outside, and I think can also stretch the field, although that's not really going to be his bread and butter. He can do it. If you look at JSN last year when he was used on the perimeter amongst 109 qualifying wide receivers, JSN running routes from the perimeter, i.e., not just soaking up screens and low A-dot targets because Shane Waldron didn't know what to do with him. He was 3rd in targets per route run, and he was 14th in yards per route run, immediately behind Michael Pittman. So the talent is firmly there. I think we just didn't get to see it unleashed last year because of the wrist injury and the slow start in that aspect. And then the pitiful usage profile that Shane Waldron tasked him with, which should have never been in his wheelhouse. Like that, I'm sorry, but that's not how you utilize a player like JSN on the NFL field. And I think, look, again, some of this is projection that I think the new OC is better than the old OC, or maybe just has his head screwed on right. But I think JSN, we're going to see what we should have saw last year in 2024.
Yeah, JSN is somebody that like I don't find myself drafting that early, like to get ahead of where he's going in drafts and to make sure he's on my team. But I'm really happy when I get him at cost, and I think the upside is really apparent with him. Fitz, where are you at on JSN this year?
Yeah, I mean, I like him, and I probably should be higher than I am. Like I do have him ranked somewhere in like wide receiver 4 range, but this is a guy who, as a true sophomore at Ohio State in 2021, sharing a field with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, Jaxon Smith-Njigba had 95 catches for 1,600 yards, sharing it with 2 of the better wide receivers in the NFL. So he's good. And, it's possible that like Shane Waldron was largely to blame for JSN not firing as a rookie last year, and that we're going to get a big bounce from him in year 2. Like, I don't know if that's all that was going on, but like we do know his average depth of target was ridiculously low. It was like, I forget, what was it, Debro? It was like under 5 yards or under 6 yards. It was pretty low. So yeah, let's hope for a little more optimal usage this year. And I think he's a great breakout candidate, and I should probably get him in a few more drafts before the season starts.
Where do you guys have him ranked right now?
I think I've got him in like that 40, 41 range, which might be a little too low. I got him at 39, actually. So I do have him inside the top 40.
I got him at 35.
Yeah,
I got him at 35.
The problem is I do like a lot of the receivers like kind of in that mid-30s range. So it's harder to move him up just because I like the other guys. But I do think that we will look back at the end of the season and say, if he's ranked 40 or lower, it was too low.
To Fitz's point, he's 95th in ADOT last year at 6.1. That's ridiculous.
Yeah,
but what do you have, Fitzy? Sorry.
43 behind Addison and McConkey, and I think I'm going to move him ahead of those 2 guys.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think truly like he is somebody who it's maybe not being discussed enough that he like how much of a league winner he could end up being if they actually use him in the right way. I mean, I've said this all offseason. I absolutely adored him as a prospect coming into the NFL. and one bad year of where he didn't get the usage we think he should have gotten. There was some injury stuff also during that season. Like, I'm very happy to buy into a bounce back for a guy with
All
that
the
pedigree.
buzz and all the camp reports have been
Yeah.
saying he's ripping it up. So again, we want to talk about like preseason drum beats we need to listen to. This, I believe, truly is one of them.
Was it JSN or Marvin Harrison that like Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave were saying like this guy's better than us? Like, because there were those
JSN.
quotes. Well, it was JSN, right?
JSN. Yep, it's JSN.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that
Yep.
speaks volumes. And to Fitz's point, he dominated when he was sharing the field with those guys. All right, let's go to our number one breakout candidates. Each Fitz, we'll start with you.
All right, we have now been doing off-season shows for about 6 months and talking about guys we're high on for 2024. So, while we like to get some new names into the rotation, sometimes you just have to play the hits. So, I guess my jumping jack flash for this would be Chase Brown, who I'm going to mention one more time. Chase Brown and Zach Moss are probably going to share the Cincinnati backfield in some sort of we don't know quite what the allotment of work is going to be for those two yet. And I tried not to get too excited when there were reports that Chase Brown was consistently running with the ones in training camp. I do think it's probably going to be somewhere close to 50-50 to start the season. But, early last year, Zach Moss went absolutely bonkers for the Colts. And so I think a lot of people just assumed he was going to be the lead back for the Bengals this year. Moss had those 3 really good games while Jonathan Taylor was on IR. Then Taylor comes off against the Titans, but the Colts used him very lightly that week. And like Moss had his biggest game of the season, 3 touchdowns against a pretty good Tennessee run D. But from week 6 on, Moss averaged 3.6 yards per carry. And I think we could kind of conclude that he was an underachiever for the 2.5 years he was in Buffalo. Like, he got beaten out by Devin Singletary every single year when they were playing together in Buffalo. So Moss isn't really explosive or fast. He isn't a prolific pass catcher, and he gets hurt a lot. Like, he's had some recurring injury issues throughout his NFL career. Chase Brown is fast and explosive, 4.4 speed. Showed us in a limited sample size last year that he can be really good as a pass catcher. There's not much to go on with Chase Brown, honestly, in the NFL, because he had 58 touches last year as a rookie. But Chase Brown averaged 27.3 carries and 29.6 touches a game in his final season at Illinois. Like, they worked that dude into the ground. He had 1,883 yards from scrimmage and 13 TDs in 12 games, completely wrecked my Wisconsin Badgers that year, 129 rushing yards and a touchdown. There's workhorse potential here if the Bengals decide they want to give someone the Joe Mixon role. And Chase Brown has shown that he can be a workhorse. And by the way, with Joe Burrow at quarterback and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins at wide receiver, whoever's going to be in the backfield for the Bengals is probably not going to see a lot of stacked boxes this year. It's probably going to be a lot of light boxes, and those running backs are going to be set up for success. Right now, I'd much rather bet on Chase Brown than Zach Moss.
D-Bro, are you kind of team Moss or team Brown?
I'm team Chase Brown because I do not want anything to do with Zach Moss. I think he's this year's Alexander Madison. I think he's one of the worst picks you could make in all of fantasy.
Where do you have Brown ranked?
I was actually updating that as I'm listening to Fitzy's expose on Chase Brown. I was actually moving him up. I've got Brown at RB37 right now, and I'm moving Zach Moss down a little bit. I will have, and this is the real takeaway here, I will have Chase Brown ranked above Zach Moss. I think that he's the better player out of the two of them. Moss has not been a guy that I've been looking at all this offseason, this draft season, best ball teams, anything really. And now that we're getting all the camp reports, like Chase Brown is splitting, he's playing time with the first team. I mean, come on, man. Like, out of this backfield, really my takeaway for Cincinnati this entire offseason has been just to invest in the passing game more. But if I go to the backfield, it's Chase Brown. I'll draft him, and I'm just full avoid for Zach Moss.
I entered this offseason more on the side of Zach Moss than Chase Brown. I have done too many dang shows with Fitz, and I have now come around and have Chase Brown ahead of Moss. He has won me over through months and months of hard work, just chipping away at my rankings. So, yeah, we're in agreement here on Chase Brown over Zach Moss at this point. D-Bro, number one breakout candidate. Who you got?
I know that people could say this is low-hanging fruit, and we've talked about him for multiple seasons. I don't care. It's Christian Watson. We get a full season of him just bullying corners, running past guys. I think he's going to break out. I think he's going to be one of the wide receivers that you can draft in the middle rounds that can tilt leagues, that can be one of the guys that is a true difference maker for your fantasy teams. And we've seen this in a bunch of small little spurts and iterations of seasons. And I think that we get the full season of Christian Watson just doing it this year. I mean, what we saw last year, Jordan Love was arguably terrible for the first half of the season, actually for more than the first half of the season. But whenever he switched it on weeks 11, weeks 12, the sad thing is Christian Watson didn't get much time with that version of Jordan Love just crushing. We got 2 games, people, and I get it's a small sample size. But in those 2 games, maybe Christian Watson, before being lost to injury, was his healthiest. Jordan Love was playing his best football of the season. In those 2 games, we got Christian Watson commanding a 23.5% target share, blowing up for 3.0 yards per route run, averaging 24 fantasy points per game. And I get it. It was only 2 games. What if he puts up 75% of that, 80% of that this season? We're talking about a player you're getting as your wide receiver 4, heck, your wide receiver 5 on some teams. That could be a legitimate wide receiver 2 this year, maybe higher if he truly takes over that number 1 role. And I get it, LaFleur is coming out there and he's like, I don't want to answer this question. We have tons of really good players. Yeah, they do. And that didn't stop Christian Watson from leading them in every statistical category we should care about when he was on the field in a full-time role last year. That happens again in 2024, and the breakout's coming.
Yeah, I don't. To me, the health is so much more of a factor and a consideration for me than the crowded wide receiver room. If you told me that, hey, this hamstring stuff has actually been solved and he is now going to be healthy for 17 games this season, which, you can't guarantee for anybody. But if you told me that, I think he'd be ranked closer to a wide receiver 1 than a wide receiver 4. I just think we what we've seen from him when he's on the field, he's attached to what looked like an elite quarterback in the second half of last season, a good play designer. We know the talent and the pedigree coming out. He's 89th overall in ECR, wide receiver 40. I think that's already starting to move up though. But look at some of the other names around him, in ECR. It's Deontay Johnson, Calvin Ridley, Jaden Reed, DeAndre Hopkins, Hollywood Brown, JSN, who we also like. But to me, Christian Watson stands out as the most potential league winner of those guys. Not that he is guaranteed to be the best value, because there's other names there that I like at cost, but the guy who we could look at in December and say, the reason I made the playoffs, the reason I won my league was because I took a flyer on Christian Watson as my wide receiver 4, and it turned out he was my wide receiver 1 or 2. Fitz, where do you have Watson ranked?
Wide receiver 36. And
I've got him at 32.
Yeah, and so with regard to the injury thing, for anyone who missed it during the offseason, he did see a specialist about his hamstring issues, and they found that there was a strength imbalance in his legs. So hopefully with an adjustment in his training, he can maybe overcome some of these chronic injury issues. And, I know people are worried about how many capable young receivers the Packers have. They have a bunch of them and 2 good young tight ends too. But when Watson has shared the field with Jaden Reed and Romeo Dobbs, he has had the highest target share of any of those wide receivers at something close to 27% with those 2 guys. And they're high value targets. His average depth of target the last couple of years has been 15 yards, 14 yards. And what should really entice fantasy managers who are considering drafting Christian Watson is that we want to chase touchdowns, and this dude has shown that he can be a prolific touchdown scorer. 8 touchdowns in a 4-game span as a rookie. I mean, it was just a touchdown bonanza for that 4-week run a couple of years ago. And then last year, he scored 4 touchdowns in a 3-game stretch. So this dude can get in the end zone. And if he does stay healthy all year, I mean, like, granted, he's probably not going to get a 1,500-yard season with as many good receivers as there are in Green Bay, but he could certainly get a 10 or 12 touchdown season without, I don't think that's too much of a stretch.
Debro, how would you rank at cost your interest in these Packers wide receivers? Jayden Reed, Romeo Dobbs, Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks. Again, considering cost, who are you getting kind of the most of and the most interested in?
For me, it comes down to I'm drafting a ton of Watson. He's going to be one of my highest drafted wide receivers as far as like best ball portfolios and just my managed league teams. So he's definitely the clear guy at cost and the number one guy that I want. But after him, I think it's really comes down to like I'm drafting a lot of Wicks because his ADP still has not creeped up. So I'm taking the shot there for variance. And I don't have a lot of love for Jayden Reed and Romeo Dobbs. Like, if I were to honestly say at cost, Jayden Reed would be the 4th guy on this in this pecking order, and Dobbs would be above him. Because, again, if the end zone targets over the last 2 years are not going to Christian Watson, they've been going to Romeo Dobbs. And the buzz is just as high on Romeo Dobbs right now in training camp about the coaching staff talking about him as improving as a route runner. Now, the thing about Jayden Reed is all of the touchdown luck happened last year. So why are we chasing that? Like, do we really think he's going to score 10 touchdowns this season when he doesn't even play a full-time role if everybody's healthy? That's tough, man. Like, could he be an outlier? Could he do it? Sure. Also, like, you're projecting a lot of outlier things for him to hit if he does not seize a full-time role, if the touchdowns do come back to earth. I mean, we're talking about a guy that was outside the top 40 wide receivers and expected fantasy points per game. So if those touchdowns don't happen, he's going to disappoint people. And if the playing time doesn't happen, he's going to disappoint people. And I know that Jayden Reed stands are going to come for me with this. I don't care. Like, that, those are facts, and you need to hear them.
Fitz, same question.
Yeah, I mean, Reed is probably the least appealing at cost for a lot of the things, a lot of the reasons Debro mentioned. Like, Reed only hits a 70% snap share in maybe 2 games last year, playoffs included. But they do endeavor to get the ball into his hands when he is on the field. So, like, I don't totally hate the price on him. But, man, I mean, both Dobbs and Wicks are interesting later round flyers at their respective costs, and I'm in on Watson. Like, I want to invest in all these guys. And, I know we're sort of portfolio drafters who play in a zillion leagues, and we're maybe able to get pieces of these guys. But, if you're watching or listening to the show and you only play in 1 or 2 leagues, maybe it's not a bad strategy to go for whoever the draft value is among the Packers. But I do think it's worth investing in this passing offense because it was really clicking last year, and I know that there were some defenses they played that weren't at full strength and were missing players or whatever. But Jordan Love definitely turned a corner late last year and looked like one of the better passers in the league. I don't think that was a fluke.
And he's been crushing it in camp. So again, I'm with you, Fitzy. I don't think the Love back half of the season when he was playing elite football, regardless of whatever metric you look at, elite football, I don't think you put that genie back in the bottle. Like, I think that that's the version that we get of Jordan Love this year. Like, he's got top 5 fantasy QB upside again this year.
I totally agree. And like, he's the type of person where, hey, if you don't want to try and guess on the Packers wide receiver, maybe just take the quarterback and know that you're going to get those points one way or another. We'll get out of there on that. And I hope everybody is, subscribed and listening to us for the rest of kind of the back half of August. This is the fun time. We've got shows coming pretty much daily at this point. So be sure to stick with us here as we get into the season. Just really like a few weeks away, which is super, super exciting. For Debro, Ed Fitz, I'm Ryan Wormeli. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you again next time.